Hi, Vinita.
Hi, Maloo.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
What we are ready to open it.
I think we'll start. It's 5:30. Flow Mumbai welcomes you to a panel discussion with legends in the entrepreneurship space, with each of them having a fabulous journey to share with us. So warm welcome to the panelists, past chairs of Flow Mumbai, members, and all others who've joined us today. Over the last 3 decades, Flow has been successfully promoting entrepreneurship and professional excellence in women pan-India. This year is no different. Our focus is on entrepreneurship and sustainable livelihood. Our senior vice chair, Lubaina Shapurwala, is heading the entrepreneurship subcommittee this year. Entrepreneurship is a major feature in the Indian economic landscape. It has become a driver of economic growth, job creation, and a source of countless ideas when translated, touches citizens across the country. It also makes communities more vibrant and inclusive. The ability to turn an idea into reality empowers people to come together and tackle our most pressing problems. These are but some of the reasons that we are so excited about having the 5 of them in the panel today. Each one has been able to convert a dream into a reality in a big way to help the community. Lizzie Chapman. I can spend hours talking about her, as she and I were colleagues in the banking sector. I always looked up at her in awe. She belonged to a different planet altogether, and compared to the rest of us who were so used to working in the bureaucratic manner. She thought differently, worked at a very fast pace, and always had a vision. While the rest of us were busy with our PowerPoint slides and impressing the bosses, she would venture out and finalize a few deals. Lizzie Chapman is the CEO of Zest Money, which is the largest and the fastest growing consumer lending fintech company in India. Lizzie was honored with the Female Fintech Leader Award, a Women in Fintech Award, and is recognized as India's top 100 women in finance. Gowri Mukherjee, a co-founder of Credit Mantri that blends cutting-edge data sciences, technology, and credit management. She's another successful banker who ventured out on her own. She's had a stint in major international banks, HSBC, Stancy, and Citibank. In her last stint at Citi, she was the head of digital business for India and also set up a center of excellence to support Citi initiatives in Asia and Europe in the space. She's an alumnus of BITS Pilani and IIM Calcutta. She's the winner of the FinTech Entrepreneur of the Year Award by DLEI in 2019. Anu Acharya. She's the CEO of Map My Genome, which is the India's pioneering personal genomics company with a vision to touch 100 million lives. Her awards run into pages, but I just picked up a few. Women Entrepreneur of the Year Award, Z Business, Special Recognition Leaders category by Indian Express, Young Leaders Forum of British High Commission, Young Global Leaders World Economic Forum. Anu, you're in a very interesting space and we are curious to know more about it. Mohit Gulati. As I said before, everyone in Flow seems to know him. I got calls from Ludhiana and from Delhi saying that they know Mohit. Thank you very much for making it despite your health issues. The person with the money, every startup's friend. He has 10 years of experience in the investment and fund management space. He has led many first round deals and over a dozen early stage ventures. Mohit brings a unique ability to connect and understand young entrepreneurs, new age technology, and businesses around it. Mohit, the only TV program that I've been seeing over the last 3 months has been Shark Tank, and I finished all the 11 seasons. And what I do understand after the 11 seasons is that what you look for is the personal effort required and the movement in the balance sheet before you invest. Would be great to see you start Shark Tank in India along with Flo. Last but not the least, Ayesha Chowdhury, our moderator for the session. She's the golden girl at the Atal Innovation Mission, Niti Aayog. Currently, she leads one of the flagship initiatives of the Government of India towards implementing innovation and entrepreneurial policies for India. Her philosophy in life is to keep challenging yourself to learn and evolve as an individual. She has received several awards. A few to mention include MIT Award, Innovator Under 35, and Your Stories, 100 Emerging Voices of 2018. I'm going to hand over to Ayesha to take it forward, and we're all looking forward to a great session this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maloo. It's a pleasure for me to welcome our prestigious panel of entrepreneurs and investors, Gowri, Lizzie, Anu, Mohit. A big welcome to all of you once again. In fact, I'd like to start by sharing that 20 years ago, when I was in high school, entrepreneurship was considered to be a rare skill. I had grown up learning that entrepreneurs are born. However, the narrative has changed today, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. And it's now all about that entrepreneurs can be created by the right mindset, the skill set, and sheer practice. In fact, one of the side effects that we're also seeing is how there's too much of romanticizing about entrepreneurship. Having said that, our attempt today is to capture insights and learnings from all our seasoned entrepreneurs from a variety of sectors, ranging from life sciences to banking, financial sector to fintech, and in turn inspire our budding entrepreneurs to become change agents for India and to contribute to the growth story of India. And this becomes all the more significant and relevant given the present crisis of COVID-19. So my first question to the entire panel is that every crisis brings along a challenge and an opportunity, and our strength lies in maximizing the opportunity and the ability to continuously innovate on the likes of Darwinism and the survival of the fittest. In fact, we have seen how COVID-19 has been affecting our economy. So the question to the panel is that how do you still think that entrepreneurs and businesses can leverage COVID-19 as an opportunity? We have seen some medtech examples where the businesses have repurposed their technologies to develop COVID-19 solutions. So it would be very, very enriching to hear it out from each one of you that how are you dealing with this situation? So Anu, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Ayesha, and thanks, Maloo. So I think I've been in the genomic space for about 20 years now. And for a long time, I think it was an industry, the life science industry was the sunshine sector for everybody, which meant that, it's really nice. You guys are great to have, but, we'll wait for your turn to come. And I think COVID basically propelled this industry very, very quickly the last 2-3 months. And I think it is the time where life sciences and people like us can actually come out and contribute, because it's not just a nice to have thing, it's actually the most essential thing for us to be able to make sure that we have capacity and capability. So at least the way I looked at it was in multiple fold. One was to say that, there is a lot of misinformation. Is there something that can be done in terms of actually guiding people on the information? The second thing was to be able to say, this is unusual times. This is not business as usual. Your supply chains are all cut off. You have to figure out ways which are other than usual. So how do you figure out those kind of things? And the third thing was to be able to say, can we actually bring in partnerships, and partnerships not just within companies, but also within, between governments and academia and the private sector, which always traditionally was a little bit hard to get together. But I think given that we had this one specific enemy that we were all dealing with, I think all of us came together. So I think this is a great way to be able to not just put pieces of information that we all know together, but it's also a time where we can actually truly contribute. So we started seeing that a lot of companies came up with, whether it was coming up with new diagnostic kits, whether it was coming up with newer ways of doing it. In our particular case, for instance, we are a genomics company, but we had capability in RT-PCR testing, for instance. So we very quickly were able to turn it around, make sure that we were able to actually contribute to the testing piece as well. The second thing we said was, how do you actually help in scaling this whole thing up? Because ultimately, I think we will get to that point where the numbers will grow, and they'll grow very, very rapidly. So how do you make sure that you can start to understand where are the bottlenecks? How do you scale this up? So whether it's in terms of collection, whether it's in terms of pooling, whether it's in some of these other things, I think for me, I've been fortunate. I've been able to work with some really bright academics and also some very fantastic state governments to be able to come up with solutions in that. So for me, it has been a really great period for us, not just as an industry, but also personally. I think I have read more, written more, and being able to contribute more. So I hope that, beyond this, there's a little bit more sustained effort towards all the three different aspects that I mentioned, but in a little bit more structured way, rather than the way we have currently done it. So I think with that, I'll let others speak. I don't want to take up all your time.
So thank you so much, Anu. I'll invite Mohit to please go next.
Aisha, I actually have a completely different view on this. So I think why don't we get Lizzie and Gowri to start with. I'm on a very different bandwagon. Also, I'm guessing I'm the only COVID positive and now negative person on this group. So my perspective has actually changed drastically in the last 20 days of being COVID positive. So I would like to go last on this one.
Sure, no problem. I'll put you on reserve. In the meantime, can I invite Lizzie, please, to share her thoughts?
Sure, yeah. So I think I would summarize it in 2 points, which is a bit more big picture and not specific to my industry. But I would say that, first of all, an entrepreneur in many ways is somebody who can see the future, right? Somebody who has a vision of the future and wants to build that. And I think what has happened in the last 3 months is any former visions of the future are now open for debate, right? So things that may have sounded incredulous or unbelievable in January are now happening, right? This is real life now. If you told me that, I will never go to a pub or a restaurant this year, I would never believe that. But how quickly I've learned to cook. And that's just a fascinating change in my behavior as a consumer. And that opens up enormous opportunity for entrepreneurs. So I'd say to anybody who's always having these ideas, and I was one of these people who was always seeing things and witnessing things and saying, why is it done like that? Do that even more at this time, because ideas are going to come up in the next few months that will completely change our destiny as consumers. And those businesses haven't been built yet, right? So I think that's the first point I'd make. And then the second point I'd make, which is very much linked to this and something I'm realizing even in my space, is the traditional winners in any industry may not come out of this alive, actually. It's quite staggering how much, not just COVID, but particularly the lockdown and economic impact of lockdown has affected businesses in a deep, deep way that many of us have not even realized yet. So a lot of our favorite brands, favorite businesses that we thought were completely unbreakable may not exist by the end of the year. And again, I think that creates enormous opportunity where previously you would have said, oh, Zomato will do this, or, oh, Flipkart will launch that. They probably can't now. And I think it really means the sky's the limit. So again, any ideas that may have sounded crazy at the beginning of the year are really worth exploring now. Everything is open for anyone.
Thank you, Lizzie. So which definitely means that now is the time to further invite more and more people to come explore, venture out and become entrepreneurs. That's interesting. Gowri, can we have you next, please, to share your thoughts with us?
I think, Gowri, you're on mute.
Hey, the last few months, thanks for that, Mohit. So I think the last few months were like a reset button for a lot of us. All our lives, we've looked at it saying, am I EBIT positive? Am I breaking even? How do I get investors to commit to more funds? All of that continues to stay as a reality. But I think what has changed in COVID has been, it's been a reset, because suddenly we've all seen revenues drop. We're all saying it's got leveled out, and now really the resilient ones have to figure out a way to rebuild from here on. So I think it's been a reset moment. And for the longest period of time, for a business model like ours, we've kind of talked to a lot of people saying we survive through cycles, we can manage a down cycle and an up cycle. And to kind of have it reach us and so soon at that is really a test of all that we have said so far. So in more ways than one, I think this is a time for us to see, can we really walk the talk that we've been talking about? And two, as we reset and move on, how do we build things? And more importantly, take people along. And this is hard times, whether it's for consumers, for the segments that we serve, whether it's for some of our employees. I think we've had all kinds of challenges come in the way business gets run. And I think for all of us, and at least for us, the biggest challenge has been to see how do we move along by taking everybody along in that process while you're looking at world in a very different light and you're looking at revenue and matrices and all of that. So to me, that's been the redefining part of COVID. I actually, personally, for me, I love working from home. And I really figured that I like the fungibility of a home. And I think it helps to have infrastructure that kind of is able to mold in. But otherwise, that's been how life has been. So it's really nice. You can see my dog. So, so these are all these little things which, and I couldn't imagine not doing a conference in what I'm wearing now. I usually would be in a formal sari. So I think these are all the little things that I look forward to saying, okay, life is reset. So let me just kind of, okay, let's do things a little differently.
Nice. That's a very interesting perspective, Gowri. Thank you so much. I think we're all enjoying some bits of the present situation for sure. But now let's come back to Mohit and hear from his perspective that how are things going to change, evolve, get better or worse from the investor's perspective?
Sure. So, if I look back at it, right? So when the lockdown started, which was about 21st of March, our narrative to most of the companies that are our portfolio, as well as to some of the companies where I either have a board seat or I'm advising, was that listen, India is doing a very preemptive lockdown and we're going to get out of it. It's going to be business as usual very quickly. So just try and conserve as much capital as you can. So if you have 6 months of burn left with you, try and extend it by 12. If you have 12, try and extend it by 18 months. And then, so the numbers are very academic for most of you. And I'm sure, for most of you, even today, the numbers are very academic in terms of, India is at, X amount of lakh cases, so many people have died and so many have tested positive. For me, things changed on 9th of May. And this is with a more personal kind of an experience when I actually contracted it. I realized, and after that, I've actually been speaking to a lot of people across academia, across medical practitioners, across people who are fellow COVID positive cases, and realized that, there is no normal year, right? There's no precedent towards what has happened. And these numbers, which seemed academic, when they actually start happening to you and your near ones, it's not a very pretty scenario. So can Zomato continue delivering groceries instead of food? Maybe yes. Aisha, you asked a very important question, which is what is the opportunity that COVID-19 has brought about? In my opinion, there is no opportunity for anyone, right? If you are trying to be opportunistic in this period, there is a sure shot mechanism of failure going ahead. Because assuming that by the end of the year, we move on from the crisis and go back to the normal life that we had, say, in February or January, then nobody will remember you for that opportune 3, 4, 5 months, right? You will always think of Zomato for food delivery. You'll always think of Ola for taxis and not for anything else. So fundamentally, I think, this is not the time to do things out of your purview. So say, let's take the case of Anu's business, right? Is there an opportunity in that business? It definitely is, but it's a vertical inside that business itself. Do not try finding opportunities in things which you don't know or you don't know how to do. Investors could be pressurizing you and saying, hey, listen, your burn's about 50, 71 crore a month. And I need you to start selling sanitizers and disinfectant robos, and I want you to sell masks or something like that. Yes, there might be an opportunity in that. But is that opportunity going to sustain? Maybe not, because the moment Dettol or Savlon start launching their products at the same price or even lower, nobody's going to buy your unbranded or smaller branded stuff. So I think, we need to most entrepreneurs, it's one of the most difficult times for businesses across the globe, right? It's not just an India phenomena. I think this is the time entrepreneurs should take out, where if you're in a B2C brand or in a B2B brand, you just want to do more conversation with your customer. Just try and build the rapport and say, hey, listen, I'm not trying to do anything funny here. I'm sticking to my core. I just want to take this time out to connect with you, to tell you that, hey, listen, when and if this opens up, I'm the person you want to be there for. I mean, something like Swiggy, right? I love Swiggy for the product that it is. I love the fact that they've not done things which they don't need to do. Now, technically speaking, Swiggy has like 40,000 delivery riders on their platform. They could have been so opportunistically using them for multiple other things. But they've stuck to what their narrative is, which is being a food delivery company, and only moved to one vertical ahead, which is, say, a grocery or a peer-to-peer, and done a lot of these email campaigns saying that, this is how we are maintaining social distancing. This is our hygiene that is being there. So I think from an investor's perspective, at least what I would look at doing is betting on entrepreneurs who have found opportunity in the business that they understand versus try to do things which they don't understand just to make a quick buck. That's how I would look at it.
Thanks, Mohit. I think that's a very, very different perspective and a very valuable one also. Of course, we have to be able to repurpose ourselves, adapt ourselves, but limit ourselves to the kind of expertise we possess and probably go, maybe like you said, just a vertical ahead, not beyond that. So I think that's very, very helpful. And also, I guess it's again a time where we can see how some of these startups who are in some of those very hardcore areas, how they can contribute more towards the government's mission of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and how they can help in making India self-sufficient in technology, R&D, and manufacturing. I think those are definitely some of the key areas which we will all be looking forward to the support from the industry in the big way. Moving on, like I was saying, that entrepreneurs are created. I think research has also demonstrated now that only 1/3 of the skills are genetic and the remaining 2/3 can be learned by observation and practice. And in fact, there are several different kinds of programs and toolkits now available in India and globally that help you to enhance your entrepreneurial outcomes and impact. So the next question to the panel is that what has been your specific individual success mantra in your journey of entrepreneurship? So the attempt here from our end would be to see that how maybe we can identify some of these key common principles that each one of you brings out, and then maybe present a sort of a framework to our aspiring entrepreneurs. So it's just trying to let us know 2 or 3 top principles that you think that really helped you to become a successful entrepreneur. So can I start with Ms. Gowri, please, this time?
Okay. Success is a relative term. So I don't know whether I'm a successful entrepreneur or not, but here is what I do, right? I think what kind of gets me going, and I think what people warm up to me, and I can see that is I do bring a fair amount of energy to the table. But more importantly, I feel a lot of energy with a sense of strong personal integrity. So to a large extent, whether it's been through this COVID, we've been very, very transparent with our employees of how we are thinking about things, how we are looking at working from home, what are the risks we see, because there have been very large brands which have been very, very large-hearted about what they do with employees. And I wish we had all those kind of deep pockets to say, you know what, do what you want, we'll give you everything that is possible. We've tried to do our best to make sure that people are safe at home, and at the same time, you try to get them to, come to work, only when it really is necessary, or they're able to do things remote. So to a large extent, I think this personal integrity, I think, is something that I think has also been put to a lot of tests during the entrepreneurial journey. But I think if I had to kind of pinpoint on one thing, which is a key, I don't know if it's a success mantra, energy is what I guess is multiplicative to people around me. And personally, for me, this journey has been very rewarding because it simply tests every bone and every cell in my body for what I truly stand for. And do I really believe in what I say, and do I show it in action? So that, I think, is, if I had to summarize entrepreneurship, those would be the 2 things for me.
Thank you so much, Gowri. And I have to say that your energy is definitely contagious. I'm sure a lot of us sitting here hearing out to you can also feel that passion that you have. And I'm sure lots of people will definitely get inspired by your energy. Can we move to Lizzie next, please? Lizzie, are you with us? Would you like to go next?
Sure, and sorry, my internet was a bit wobbly then. Okay, actually, similar to Gowri, I don't know that I would say I'm a success, but I'm happy to share what I think has worked, at least in building a company, right? So what are the kind of absolute no-brainers to enter the entrepreneurship journey for people who are thinking about it? Agree with Gowri, I think hard work is a no-brainer, but I would add on to that, execution, not just ideas. I think anyone who's gone down this journey will tell you that you end up doing a lot more boring hard work than you ever imagine. And actually your ideas and insights are just not so relevant once you get started. I often say to my team, I had one good idea, that's it. That every single day since then is just hard work. And you've got to be ready to get your hands dirty, get involved. You can't get somebody else to do a lot of the hard work. So that's probably number one. If you don't think you're up for that, then it's not going to work. I think number two is one that I would never have said I was, but in hindsight, it makes sense. And that is fearlessness. And the reason I learned this is an investor who invested in us recently told me afterwards, the reason we chose to invest in your company is because we saw that you're fearless. And I thought that was a fascinating terminology. But the way I thought about it, it's not that I like jumping out of airplanes or, you know, doing stupid things. I just don't really care what people think. So I think that's a really useful skill set. And that's what fearlessness is to me. So I don't have a fear of people's opinions or judgments. I just do what I want to do and get on with it. And I think that's going to be critical, especially when you start raising money. Because if you go into it with a sense of, oh, what do they think of me? It's going to be a disaster. So I think fearlessness would be my number two. And then the third one, which is very relevant for these times, and I think all of us are learning this one, is you've got to be good with ambiguity, right? When you start a company, you have no idea how it's going to work out. And we all know the statistics and the probability of success. And if you're somebody that needs a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and you need to know where you're going to be, you will not enjoy this journey. So I think whether it comes naturally or whether, you know, you have to develop this, and it takes things like meditation and mindfulness to develop this, learn to be okay with randomness and ambiguity. Then it will be a much more enjoyable ride.
Thanks very much, Lizzie. I think I am definitely quite tempted to come and work with you, because this is something that really resonates with me, that how do you work with ambiguity, how you're so fearless. I think I will definitely come and knock your door soon enough. Can we go to Mohit next, please? Because it will be very interesting again to hear from you that from the investor's perspective, what is it that you think really our entrepreneurs need to have within themselves to change the world?
Yeah, so I mean, as investors, I think, you know, we are like parents, and you know, our entrepreneurs are like toddlers who are walking in front of us, and we see them making all kind of mistakes, right? We see them fall so many times, and then get up and turn into young, great adults. The way I would look at it, you know, I've been fortunate to have created about $1.5 billion in market cap, and I'm just going to try and summarize some of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with in terms of, and also being an entrepreneur myself. I think, you know, you have to be a man or a woman with a plan, right? So as an entrepreneur, if you are laser focused on what you want to build and what you want to achieve, you know, in a way, you're a little dreamer who's sitting on the sidelines and building this sort of a hypothetical castle. So you have to have that plan, at least broadly in your mind. It may not ever be able to be translated on an Excel sheet or on a company presentation, but you need to know where you want to get to. And then have the ability of orchestrating your entire team to work with you to achieve that. It's not necessary that everyone in the team has to agree with you. Like in Lizzie's case, right? She said fearlessness. I'm guessing she's built a team which is as fearless as her. So they're not fearful about telling her if she's making a mistake. And that's the kind of team you want, right? You want a great set of people who help you be the man with a plan. So those are the two abilities that every entrepreneur should definitely have. Besides that, two important entrepreneurial qualities that I've seen emerge out. One is knowing where you stand and having the acumen of knowing when to pivot your business. If something's is not working and you have to kind of pivot, knowing that, okay, not to get sentimentally attached to what you have started, knowing that there is a better thing available, moving and doing that pivot is very important. So entrepreneurs have to be a little more cognizant of doing that. It happened to me personally before setting up the fund with the ITI group. I shook hands with a set of individuals who were my partners. In about a year's time, I made all the mistakes that were available. I realized that, okay, is my entrepreneurial dream intact? Yes, it was intact. But is this the right set of co-founders, or is this the right set of team I want to build it with, or can I build it with? The answer was no. So the ability to move out of that relationship and that partnership and doing something new immediately without having to brood over it and spending time, that defies a great entrepreneur from just a mediocre one. A lot of entrepreneurs will, not understand when to call it quits or when to, make that pivot. So it's very essential that you understand where you stand in the market. So yeah, I think broadly those 2-3 points from my end.
Thank you so much, Mohit. I think that was extremely helpful. And what I really loved is when you said that you're like a parent and the entrepreneurs are like toddlers. I think I'm going to definitely recommend you as a potential investor to a lot of my aspiring entrepreneur friends. That's extremely nice. Anu, I'd like to come to you next. And I think yours, again, is going to be a very, very different world because it's hardcore life sciences technology where the life cycle is so long as compared to the other e-commerce and other technology-based startups. So I think, again, it'll be very interesting to hear your thoughts. Anu?
Sure. So actually, Mohit stole away 2 of the points I wanted to say, but I had 4. I said dream, genes, of course, team, and then keeping it lean, right? So these are the 4 things I wanted to bring up. And clearly, I think when you look at an entrepreneur, and I've been in genomics, I've done it twice, and we've also acquired 3 other companies. And I think one of the things is that can you actually, especially in life sciences, because you're constantly in cutting edge, you have to have the passion, you have to have the dream to be able to, do something like this and be able to take that step forward and get things done. And the second piece that you mentioned, you actually mentioned a little bit, so I'm glad you did that. You said 30% is genetic, which is actually a significant part of it, right? So maybe I'd like to explain it in a little bit, a slightly different context, right? So there are many different things, right? Especially what happens to your brain. And I think many of the other panelists also mentioned, mindfulness and many other pieces. So there are clearly genes that are affecting your personality, but there is also tags on a DNA that change when you practice, right? So which basically start to explain how you behave in certain cases. So when you start to understand the genetic influence on your how you behave, I think you can start to also make a better entrepreneur, which basically what I'm trying to preach to everybody is get a test done, maybe we'll help you a little bit more, right? And the 4th thing I think is have to be very, very lean, because in many ways, I think a lot of entrepreneurs got used to getting a lot of capital. And sometimes when you have too much capital, it's very easy to actually burn the capital. And I know that because when I play video games, for instance, when I have a lot of money in my, in that game I'm playing, I don't think about it much. You're spending it very quickly. But if you had only very little, you make a lot more judicious use of it. So I think it's very important for every entrepreneur to make sure that they can keep an operation lean and to be able to scale up very quickly if needed. And I think that's if you're able to do that, then it becomes easier, especially when you're in an industry which is not a straight line. You're still trying to figure out how things are going to function and how you're going to keep those. But I think in general, most industries, it would be always great to keep things lean, because one advice that someone gave me once when I talked to somebody who failed in this space, and I asked him, I said, what is the one piece of advice you would give me? And he said, keep your costs low. So I said, you mean I sell it at a lower price? And he said, no, keep your costs low. So it doesn't matter what the price is in the market, you can still be able to survive, right? So I think that's the sort of thing that you have to make sure that when you are running a company, that you start thinking, you start innovating on every possible thing, not to cut corners, but to be able to innovate and find ways to be more efficient. So
thank you so much. I know that was extremely helpful. And I think what I really hear from all of you is that ultimately the success is about how we define it. And it's also a function of both the mindset and the skill set. And the skill set in turn, of course, includes technology and the soft skills or the 21st century skills. So if we have the right kind of mindset, we can definitely make it big and we can really transform this world to a better place. Thank you so much. So next, very quickly, I'll go back to Gowri and Lizzie both, because they both have worked a lot in the banking, financial, and investment space respectively for several years before they started on to their entrepreneurial journey. So I think it's very, very interesting for us to hear that what was the tipping point in their life when they decided to suddenly make that switch and move on to entrepreneurship, and who or what inspired them to follow this path. So can I come back to Gowri, please?
So there was no one aha moment. So it was, in all my jobs, whether it was in a large bank or I've always kind of thrived in areas which were newer. So, I used to be part of, so when the first wave of .com happened, I joined an internet startup, the company which I worked for went through a NASDAQ listing, and I loved that stint. Because I loved that stint, I kind of said, I like the cusp of business and technology, let me just stay in it. It was unnatural and not the usual thing to do if you work, and then the crash happened, and then I needed a job. So when I got back to working in a large bank, which was Citi at that time, joined the team that used to be what was called as the e-business team. So it is the team that was a startup within a large bank, and continued to be in this new area. You're kind of trying to put things together. So kind of always thrived in these areas where things were not necessarily well formed, and there was a little amount of creativity in putting out things. So it was something that I figured I liked to be in that zone. And because I worked with a lot of companies which went on to become really successful, was always kind of coming up with, coming up with work colleagues and all of them saying, why don't we do this? Why don't we start this out? And it was, so constantly was looking at options. I also come from my father was a first generation entrepreneur. And so, it was not that, entrepreneurship was a big word for me. I'd seen it around. I had a feel for how these things, it was not all rosy. So when I eventually made the decision, it was basically with two work colleagues, three of us who used to work in Citi together, and trying to solve for a space which I felt financial services hadn't solved for. And there was a market movement behind. There was a lot of digital adoption. So credit and collections were areas which were not necessarily digitized before. And that's really what got me started. So to come back to, therefore, what was that aha moment? I don't think there was necessarily an aha moment. Always wanted to do something, myself. And that's really, what got me started in this journey.
Thanks, Gowri. I think you would be a perfect candidate to also demonstrate that entrepreneurship has been in your genes and along with the environment. Can I come to Lizzie now, please? Would you like to share, Lizzie?
Sure. So very different, actually. I grew up in a very kind of working class household. My mother was actually a cleaner. She had no concept of what an entrepreneur would even mean. But I always wanted to make money. And I think that's really important. And I think that's sometimes forgotten when we talk about startups. So I always had a side hustle, like from the age of about 10. I had like 3 or 4 random businesses where I'd be buying and selling things, jewelry, or I'd buy stuff online when that was first possible and sell it in my school. And then I randomly ended up moving to India, long story. And I just got frustrated that, the hotels were not what I expected in Bombay. So I decided to start a hotel on the side. And then I remember when DBS approached me to join, and they were so confused. How can she be a banker and run a hotel at the same time? But that wasn't strange to me because the hotel was making lots of money, and why would I give it up? So I think having a kind of desire to always be making money and seeing opportunities is essential. But I'm glad I did the whole corporate thing. It taught me how I don't want to build a business. I learned a lot about politics and hierarchy and all those things that slow down businesses and slow down innovation. And so I really appreciate those experiences. But I think the aha moment for me in terms of finally building Zest, which is a proper entrepreneurial challenge, is actually something that people don't talk about enough. And I'm really going to stress this point. It was the coming together of the right people at the right time. And I think if I hadn't done it with my co-founders, there is no way we would be here today. And it took that moment in time for all three of us to be ready and for the stars to align and for our skill sets to match, that complementarity. It's a bit like a good marriage. In fact, I think it's more important than a good marriage because you spend more time with them. And if that hadn't happened at that moment, at that time, and we hadn't all wanted to pull the plunge together, there's absolutely no way we'd be here today. So I would say to people that are still kind of worried about this timing point and when should I do it? When should I do it? You will know when it's the right time. And I think anyone, I'm sure Gary's nodding, I'm sure anybody who has great co-founders knows this. The minute it's just like you will know when you want to marry that person. That's the right time. And it's a lot of gut feel and you can't force it, but don't be scared to wait until you find the right people.
Thanks, Lizzie. So what I hear is definitely from both of you is that you have to just let your creative self to unleash and explore and try out entrepreneurship whenever you feel is the right time for you. Great. I'll also now like to get a different perspective from Anu, who has been an entrepreneur for more than 2 decades now. And I think we'll try and just get a sense from her a little bit on the funding aspect. So since India has seen several instruments of funding get evolved, ranging from grants to soft loans to debt funding, equity funding. So what in your mind, Anu, is the key to deciding the right kind of instrument and the right investor? What does your experience say?
So I think it depends on the industry you are in for sure. I think if you are in an industry, for instance, where you're going to get guaranteed returns immediately, then I think it makes sense to just borrow some money and make sure that, if you can quickly pay it back, I think it's the best because you retain a lot of the equity in your company. However, if you take life sciences, and even though I haven't taken any government funding, but I think that's the better, I think BIRAC is a fantastic example of how it has been propelling a lot of the life sciences industries, right? So if you can get access to that in the early stages, it sort of mitigates some of the risk that young entrepreneurs would have to take. And I think now they are funding quite a large number of companies and also a significant amount, not just a little bit, right? So compared to 20 years ago, I think today we are in a much better situation than it was, at least on getting on any sort of grants from the government. The third thing I think which is the more preferred route for many people, but is actually an expensive route, is the equities, is the equity part, right? Because even though it seems like free money, it's actually money that you have to pay back, right? And I think a lot of people forget that. And a lot of people forget that, when you get investment, it also means that you have a responsibility to make returns for your investors. And typically that's actually fairly high. So if you can sustain with no investor at all, I think it's the best option. If you can get away with like a little borrowing, it's even it's fine and you can return it, you're good. But I think in the end, when you take an industry like a life sciences industry, there is some amount of risk that is there. There is also a long incubation period and you might not have the resources. In those cases, I think getting an equity, especially if it's significant, will give you a lot of runway to be able to make sure that you can get to that point. And I think a good investor also adds a lot of not just credibility, but also adds connections and network. So I think it's very important that it's not just about getting money. I think getting money, if all you need is capital, I think then you're better off just going to your bank and getting some money and making sure, or beg from your family and friends, which is usually the most preferred way to for a lot of entrepreneurs. But I think if you're trying to make a very big global scale, business, sometimes it's better to go with a very good equity investor, because I think they also help you in getting to the next stage and so on. So I think it depends completely on where you are and how big you want to be and how you want to grow the business. But the most important thing for me, I feel, is that you have to make sure that you really can work with the investor in any form, because it is going to be a long-term investment for both sides, right? From not just from an investor perspective, but also from the entrepreneur perspective, because you have to work with them on a long period of time. So while Mohit calls us the toddlers, I think sometimes it can be the other way around also.
Interesting. Thanks, Anu. And I think now I'm so tempted to come back to Mohit and hear his thoughts on this particular question as well, since he has been on both the sides, being an entrepreneur and an investor. And with a little follow-up question that I want to add for you, Mohit, is also that you definitely have that eye to identify the spark for entrepreneurship in young and all kinds of people. So what are the one or two parameters that you think makes an enterprise investable? And does your decision also get influenced by things like gender, age, or demographics, etc.? Just, if you can give a sense of that also.
Sure. So I'll take the second question first. Does my investment decision get changed by gender, age, demographics? Absolutely not. Because I think an entrepreneur is, you cannot be perceived with whether it's a M or a F or a don't know. Honestly, I don't care, because an entrepreneur is an individual that I'm betting on, who has to have the highest levels of integrity. I think, if you can solve the integrity checkbox, half the battle is won there. Because, a good entrepreneur is someone who is truthful to not only his business, to his people, but also to his investors. And you will automatically make money on them. My journey of entrepreneurship actually began way back in 2012. So I was working at a hedge fund, then I was working at an institutional equity house, doing domestic broking for stock markets. And I mean, I used to love my job. Unlike a lot of people who say that they got bored of their job, I used to love my job. It was fascinating. It was a lot of money being transacted in front of me on a daily basis. It was great fun. The reason I got into this is actually a crazy story of serendipity. So I took my GMAT in 2012, decided to do a B school degree, which is what traditionally 24, 25-year-old people who are slightly clueless and lost in life do. So that was my plan, and I'd saved up a little bit of capital for it. I had about maybe 25, 30, 40 lakhs available of capital, which I'd saved up in my working life. And funnily, I got the admit invite for a very decent B school in the US, but I wanted to choose an Indian school. And at the same time, I had the opportunity of investing in Ecom Express, which in 2012 wanted to create a e-commerce dedicated logistics business. The reason I'm telling you the story is because I took a call at that time of not pursuing the MBA and actually putting that entire money in Ecom Express, and I made a substantially large amount of money there. Now, of course, the ROI can be questioned, because that's a one-off ROI versus an MBA, which will give me a 30-year ROI. But for me, what was more important was living and breathing the entrepreneurial journey with that team, because it was all the money that I had. So it's like a B school, right? When you go to a B school, you're determined to do well, or you're determined to achieve well in that degree, because you or your family have spent a lot of money in getting you there. For me, I had spent a lot of money in Ecom Express for me to learn things there and for also hopefully make money out of it. So I think that journey of learning, of building a business with a great entrepreneur, taught me that, okay, this is my life. I love to build businesses with people. I love to invest on the back of great people who have the integrity to not only build a great business, but also return capital back. And that's how my journey of entrepreneurship started. So, I mean, would I have been a great fit at a large institutional office? I would have. But do I love what I do today? It's because I genuinely love to work with people and learn new businesses. So it doesn't matter, the reason why, I'm going to actually answer Maloo's question now. The reason why a lot of people at Flow know me is because I've done a lot of pro bono work with so many women entrepreneurs. I mean, not necessarily that every business needs to be funded, right? Sometimes you just need a little bit of direction. I don't know if Rupali's on this call. I'm invested in Rupali's business, which is Tarusa. This is ethnic handbags, single women lady entrepreneur. She has the best understanding of design. She has a great product. Today, with a very lean team, she does a 10-15 lakh rupee monthly revenue. Is this going to be a 1,000 crore business? Maybe not. But I'm okay with building 20 businesses which are each doing 10-15 crores of revenue. That, I think, the problem in India today is entrepreneurship, and Gowri actually mentioned it very clearly, was the yardstick of measurement of entrepreneurship has unfortunately become, what is your valuation? Are you a unicorn? Are you worth Series A, B, C? It doesn't matter, right? And if the government has to, work with entrepreneurs, it has to actually. In fact, what I love about the government is the government doesn't understand valuation, right? Which in a way is great, because when you don't understand valuation, you understand that okay, what is it required for a young person to start a business? That person needs capital. Let's give them access to capital. Will they be worth XYZ because of access to capital? Maybe, maybe not. So my sense is, you're going to see a new breed of entrepreneurs being built who are generally doing great businesses, not for the heck of, being able to raise capital. And the good part about this whole COVID scenario is that most investors have shut their doors, barring us, because we have kept our doors open. And any entrepreneurs over here, we are happy to listen to your story. So I hope I've, kind of answered all of your questions. If I've missed anything, I'm happy to kind of elaborate on that.
Yes, absolutely, Mohit. And I think the key highlight for us has been that how mentors play a very significant role in the entrepreneurial journey. It doesn't have to always be attached with some funding, but it can just be pure mentorship as well. And I think the other big highlight was, of course, for all the aspiring entrepreneurs to hear that your decisions do not get affected by age, gender, and demographics. I think people are really looking forward to that sort of a scenario all across India where you don't get affected by such things. So in the interest of time, I think
just one last thing I want to add there, right? On the mentorship part, I know a lot of people who are doing this. I will give you mentorship for some exchange of equity. I don't do that because I'm a firm believer of karma. If you do good, you will get good back. You don't need to take free equity out of people's companies just because you've given some bit of your time. I mean, I think all of us somewhere need to give back, and everyone can do it in different ways, right? You could give it back to the entrepreneurial community, you could give it back elsewhere. But the problem with India, right, is we've always had a twisted angle of everything. Unfortunately, for 70 years, we were governed by people who had twisted angles. So we ourselves became twisted in every angle. I think it has to be completely pro bono, and only then will you see a lot of success coming in.
Absolutely, Mohit, totally echo with you. And I think in the interest of time, I'll just very quickly come to my last question now, where I'll request everybody to be very brief. And I think this is again going to be a key for us, that there has been so much of lack of trust between the government and industry. And I don't think I have to say more on that. But what is important is for us to understand that what can be done to institutionalize this relationship building between the industry and government. And since I come from the government, I can take the liberty to ask you that what can we do better as a government for all of you? Very quickly, if all of you can, just give us your parting thoughts. Let's start with you, Mohit.
I always try to duck these government questions because they put me into trouble 9 out of 10 times. The way I like to summarize things with this present government is their intent is right, their execution sucks. They want to do things right, but they just don't know how to execute it. So I'm actually glad people like you are partnering with the government and at least are good sounding boards for the people at top. I've had the good fortune of interacting with almost all of them on a one-on-one basis. From the top, right? If you look at the PM's speeches, if you even speak to him on a one-on-one, the intent is great. I think they don't have the right set of talent to do the execution. So if you can get good executors out there, and I don't mean the bureaucrats being good executors, right? I mean, with all due respect to them, there's a little bit of a sort of a arms race between them in some ways, where it's hilarious when I see so many bureaucrats on Twitter publicizing what they do and creating like a persona around themselves. I mean, I don't need to see an IS officer being a Twitter celebrity. I mean, there is something amiss there. You need people who are executing without having to really publicize what they're doing. So if the people who have the right intent, and if you can get people who can execute that intent without so many strings attached around it, I think there will be so much that we will be able to achieve. So I'm going to leave it at that, not dwell further deep, but that's my limited take: intent versus execution.
Thanks, Mohit. Don't worry, we can get on an offline conversation with you to get more thoughts in detail. Anu, can we come to you next, please? Anu?
Yeah, so I think one thing, and I think this was probably the first time that I've actually been so closely working with both academics and the state government. And I would say that, I think individually people have the right intent to do certain things. But I think where we struggle as a nation is two areas. One is that we don't have SOPs in place for a lot of things. So a lot of things are done, just like that, right? And typically, I think it becomes hard to sort of put multiple pieces of that information, especially when subject like health is so distributed across, whether it's nation, central versus state versus others. So I think it's very important that we make sure that whatever is done is an SOP that is done in the interest of a nation, right? And I think that's writing that down, being able to iterate through this whole process is a very important part of it. The second thing that I think would be very helpful is that just like it has happened now, where a lot of people have devoted time and energy from across the globe, actually, a lot of the academics, a lot of the other people have actually put in the time and energy to actually help in advising, whether it's government, whether it's otherwise, people like me who are, I think that we have something to add or give value to. I think all of that, if can be made into a knowledge base, so that we actually are much more prepared in the future, but also use this information to say, how do we make our innovation platforms or the way we actually think about things, or think about disasters, think about how certain things will happen, make it better. And I think, instead of being able to get so many government orders that we all have to figure out how to follow, I think it would be great if we already had them in place, And I think that's a learning which obviously none of us had the, it's been 100 years since we had a pandemic like this. So it's hard to sort of think about that. But I think it's very helpful to be able to make sure that at least for the future, we learn from the mistakes here, that we chronicle all the mistakes that we've done in this pandemic, and that can be used to actually create the right kind of SOPs for the future. That would be those would be my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Anu. That was very valuable. I'll now quickly request Lizzie also to share her thoughts on this, please.
Sure, and I'm going to play Mohit. I'm going to be really controversial and say the opposite of everyone. I think you actually don't want your government to be too helpful in your startup ecosystem. I think they're doing plenty. I think what makes India so fantastic as an entrepreneurial environment is the fact that we don't expect handouts or help, and people just get on with it anyway. And I'll just give you a small anecdote, which is I'm obviously from the UK, and at the beginning of COVID, if you remember, there was all this confusion about masks. Should we wear masks? Don't know, blah, blah. And about a month in, I asked all my friends and family in the UK, have you just bought some masks? Because, it's worth a try. And they said, oh, no, you can't. They don't exist. There are none in the shops. There's none on the shelves. And the same day, I walked around our local area, and there must have been 5 or 6 guys standing at the end of the street selling homemade masks, just made in the back of their van. And I just thought, oh, this is why we're going to bounce back quicker, right? Why had nobody in the UK figured out how to sew a mask? It's not rocket science. So I think we shouldn't ask for too much. I think our government should be umpire, not groundsman. We don't want them to get too involved in our businesses. And I think they're doing enough, which is putting India on the map as a digital first economy. And that's the best that I can hope for.
Thanks, Lizzie. That definitely makes me feel better that there's something we're definitely doing right, if not everything. Gowri, to you, please.
Honestly, I think little to add to what's been spoken so far. I think intent, no questions. I think we're seeing a series of strong initiatives. I think it's really the question of follow through, because a lot of the initiatives have been driven through institutions. I completely agree with Lizzie. I think letting businesses run and to be able to do it in an unhindered fashion in itself is a big boon. I think that, to be able to do that is a big one. I think we should continue to let the government play the role it is meant to play. And more importantly, the series of measures that have been announced, what will be good is to make sure that whatever has been delivered through institutional, certain existing institutions to deliver and to the last mile, making sure that it actually indeed gets delivered and following that through would be, I think, critical for the revival to truly kick in. And I think that's what we'll be waiting and hoping that will get followed through.
Thank you so much, Gowri. And I definitely think that, yes, there are some things which have been done right, but lots more for all of us to do. And I'm sure we'll all go forward in this journey together. Now I'll check with Maloo if I still have 2 more minutes for my rapid fire question, or should I hand it back to them for opening up for question answers, because I already see I've crossed my time limit. Sorry for that. Let me
Go
check with
ahead.
Maloo.
Aisha, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I guess now that we've gathered so much of intellectual gyan, let's also try and take a quick look and get a sense of a different side of all these entrepreneurs. And I have a very quick rapid fire question for them, that if they all had a magic stick, what are the two things that they would do to just suddenly transform and change this world? And like I said, it's a rapid fire, so we don't have more than 30 seconds per speaker. Let's start.
Hello.
Let's start with Mohit, please.
Okay. I think better healthcare for sure. The world definitely needs better healthcare. I think we've taken it for granted, and we need more honesty in the way we work as individuals. Our interpersonal skills need more honesty. If these two factors the world can magically just build in, we'll be in a very nice place.
Thanks, Mohit. Anu, would you like to go next, please?
So I think one is to realize that we are all humans, and that we are, even though we are 99.9% alike and there's very little differences, we have to respect each other and make sure that that's something we can do. And the second thing is respect for the environment. I think the whole pandemic and other situations that we are seeing is partly because we don't really care about the environment and the other species. So I think everything else follows from that.
Wonderful. How about Gauri? Would you like to go next, please?
I would say sense of humor and levity is what I'd want everybody to add lots of it.
Thank you. Lizzie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say you've stolen all mine, you people, but basically more empathy, I think, which covers a lot of the same points, more empathy and more willingness to do hard things. So I think that's what we've realized with the COVID and with the environment. We have to be prepared to do much tougher stuff now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all the panelists for taking the time to speak with us, and more importantly, to inspire thousands of our viewers and especially the women entrepreneurs. Let us all hope that we all stay safe together in this strange time and leverage this as an opportunity to unleash the creative entrepreneur from within, like I said. So I'll now pass it on to the FICCI group to open it up for questions, please. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much,
Thanks,
Aisha,
Aisha,
for being a great moderator.
Sorry. Thank you so much. I think this was a short course on what they don't teach you at Harvard Business School. It was fabulous. I think we got a lot of insights, and we also have the Secretary General of FICCI, Mr. Dilip Chenoy, with us. Thank you so much, sir. Would you like to say something, please?
Thank you, but I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed the panel discussion, and thank each one of the panelists not only for joining this panel discussion, but so.
Mr. Chenoy, the audio isn't coming in too clear.
Okay, just give me 1 minute. I'll rectify that. Okay, so I just wanted to thank Maloo for this great session. I also wanted to thank the entire panel for so freely and frankly and so candidly, sharing, what makes a good entrepreneur, some things that you believe in, and also, Aisha, for your great moderation of the session. I really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot personally. FICCI also is an organization that needs entrepreneurial skills. So thank you for this opportunity. I don't want to ask a question. I think many listeners have a question to ask. So over to them. Thank you very much for this opportunity to listen in.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Lubena now. Do you have time to answer a few questions, panelists, or because we've run out of time, so we just want to check with you. So if you can ask a couple of questions, Lubena, go ahead.
I'm okay at my end.
Okay.
Mohit, Lizzie, are you okay with questions? Do we have a couple of minutes?
Absolutely.
Upasana, you want to take over now?
Sure. So I think I have a question. So maybe these days, all conversations lead to COVID. And yesterday we heard some good news saying, New Zealand has declared itself corona free. And, a lot of talk has been around saying, a lot of credit of it goes to the strong leadership of Jacinda Ardern. And we've always heard her say that, this is a government which will lead with kindness. And which, if you see, is a very feminine trait. And, only a female leader, I feel, can come out and say, mine is a government which will actually lead with kindness. This is a culture she has defined for her organization or for the country to say. So how do you think being a female entrepreneur defines the culture for your organization? So I think Gowri, Lizzie, Anu. Yeah.
You gave too many
Gowri,
people choice options. So I would say one thing that I think, while kindness is normally associated with females, I don't think it is necessarily only a female trait. And similarly, I think there are many other traits that are found in many other people. But I think to have the courage to say so, because it is okay for a woman to say, I think is probably more likely to happen in that case. So I think one of the things we all need to do is to make sure that we don't stigmatize those that associate certain types of traits with either feminine or male. And therefore, I would say that, I don't think that that's necessarily something that maybe I would say, but I think I really like the fact that she was able to do what she did for the country. But I'm the firm believer that one shouldn't associate specific traits to a gender, because I think that's part of the reason why we have these sort of conversations in the first place.
Or you want to go next?
So I think this, okay, on a note of, if I look at myself as a woman at home, right, I expect certain things of my children, I expect certain things of my husband. And at work, it's the same thing. I have certain standards and everybody kind of is expected to veer towards that. Does that make us a woman-centric organization? I don't know. But it does, I think we do hold a bar. And I think the bar that we hold oneself to is the bar that we hold, like the way I hold a high bar for my kids, I do hold a high bar for all the people I work with and for myself. So, so I think if I were to say, is it a feminine trait? I really don't know. I tend to agree with Anu on, there are no, I really believe that all of us are a fungible mix of like the Ardhana Dishra combination of, male and female, but all of that aspect apart, I think if I am more Asian mom than a Western mom, so I tend to work the same way at work.
Yeah. Yeah, Lizzie, I think we would like to hear your thoughts.
So I'm with Anu and Gowri. I actually hate these kind of gender generalizations. But I do think that there are behaviors that women get rewarded for over time and behaviors that men get rewarded for over time. And I actually disagree on kindness. I don't think that's a good one. I think exactly as Anu said, many, many men display high levels of kindness. I think the one that was more interesting in the COVID leadership debate was different leaders' willingness to say, I don't know what to do next. So that kind of transparency and authenticity, which I won't call out any names, but some of the biggest leaders in the world or the leaders of the biggest countries in the world were very bad at doing. And I think it comes more naturally to women because we're repeatedly told we don't know what we're doing, that we're actually more comfortable saying, I'm not exactly sure, but follow me on this. And that was definitely the way I managed the COVID situation. I don't know about the other women, but I would say, look, things are changing quickly. I'll update you as soon as I get information, but you just have to kind of trust me and put your faith in us and we'll get through this. And I think that came a bit easier to some of the women I know than some of the men. So there you go. I said, I don't believe in sweeping generalizations, but I've just made one. that's my interpretation of what happened.
I think that was a bunch of interesting responses. I think Maloo, I'll hand it over to you for the next question.
I would request Sucheta Shah, a past chair, to ask a question, please. You could unmute yourself, Sucheta.
Yeah, I did that, yeah. My question would be to you, Mohit. You said a prerequisite for an entrepreneur would be a good plan. So what are the 2 points or key points you would look into that plan for, say, a startup to pitch to a VC? another, and maybe has it changed post-COVID, or is it the same what you're looking for?
Yes, I think, I mean, it's too early to say anything. I think that word post-COVID itself, when is it going to start? When that process will start? For me, Unlock 1.0 is not post-COVID yet. I mean, Suchita, I know you stay with us here in Mumbai, and I know some of the panelists are from Delhi. I mean, I don't think we have the right to even talk about post-COVID right now. So I think, I don't know what's going to happen post-COVID, but from an entrepreneur's perspective, you may not have like to the T, you don't know exactly how you're going to draw and build your business. But what I tried to highlight was, you have a rough idea of where you want to get. Like if you ask Lizzie or Gauri or Anu, any of these guys, right? They have a sort of a faint picture of where they will see themselves a few years later. It's going to be impossible for them to quantify and exactly tell me the journey there, because then it's not fun, right? Then it's not fun to build these businesses if they can exactly tell me their journey. But even just having having that faint idea in your mind of where you want to get to or what you're building, that alone is great. So I think when we look at, when we meet entrepreneurs, we don't expect them to know everything on day one. We don't expect them to have everything on pen and paper, but just have that ability to dream big. I think that's very important. That is what distinguishes great entrepreneurs from just regular entrepreneurs. I mean, Mukesh Ambani, right? I've had the good pleasure of, working with him for a little while. The way he, just thinks larger than everybody else, right? It's incredible. I mean, for me, he's one of the most distinguished entrepreneurs out there because he's got, that tenacity to look at things at a size 10, 100, 1000x versus what we do. He may not get it right. I mean, there can be there can be challenges in execution, but the ability to dream, if that is showcased, I think, as investors, we definitely bet on that.
Thank you, Mohit, and thank you, Sucheta. I'm going to hand over to Lubena to help us wrap up. I think we've gone past 10 minutes, so please go ahead, Lubena.
Thank you. I'm Lubena, Senior Vice Chairperson of Mumbai Chapter. I've been designated to say thank you. We've all been saying thank you to you throughout the evening, actually. And it's wonderful for you to share so much of your personal self. It means a lot to us to know that we're not alone and we're all on the right path, to all us entrepreneurs out there. So on behalf of all of us at Flow Mumbai, I would like to thank Lizzie, Gauri, Anu, and Mohit for joining us today. Aisha, thank you so much for holding this whole event together and giving us such a wonderful 1 hour, little over an hour actually. Past chairs who have joined us today, and Vinita Bimbet, our past national president and past chair Mumbai, and the Mumbai team, a special thank you for spending time with us this evening. I have Kaveri here from the Think team in the back end who's doing all the technical stuff, and thank you, Kaveri, for being here. So with all the thanks being said, I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Gauri, you didn't reply to my question.
Hey, you've asked me a question, is it? Okay.
It's
What's your baby's name? I have two. My dog, actually I have three. My dog's Joey, and he's the one that I'm most fond. As you can see, I have an older daughter who's a teenager. She's 15. And I have a son who is 12.
Okay.
So I have
I was asking about Joey because I have my Troy on my foot right now, waiting for me to finish this call so I can take him down for a walk.
Nice. I have two at home as well.
I
have two at home as well, and I could actually connect with Gauri because I have two little pups in the house as well.
Oh, nice.
Oh, so cute.
So I guess all of you have to go and walk your dogs now.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Maloo, I know you're fed up of us.
Come on.
All right, thank you so much.
I called you, so it can't be. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a nice evening, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.